What's up, everyone? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I have an album review for you. Once again, our friends at Screaming Toilet brought us some cool goodies. Again, check out the site. It's a fun one full of reviews, articles, podcasts, etc. Definitely check it out. It's a good time. So today, I am reviewing Cursus Bellum's album Ex Nihilo Nihil Fit, which loosely translated from Latin means nothing comes from nothing. This came out last year on Downfall Records. I guess it took some time for it to get over here, but either way, I'm reviewing it now. So this band is from Sweden. They formed in 2013, and there are only 2 members in the studio for this. They play pretty much blackened death metal, but there are hints of tech death here and there, and just straightforward black metal too. So it opens up with Soil Companion, and right away you get a sense of sort of a very atmospheric, dissonant style of blackened death metal, with a very old school approach that's somewhere between Nile and Rotting Christ, honestly. It likes to go between like more dissonant strumming and tremolo riffing to straight up angular riffing that's more straightforward death metal. So it's an interesting balance in terms of styles. The production on this is pretty raw. The vocals seem to be pushed back in the mix quite a bit. Sometimes they're really hard to make out, especially if the bass is up, because the bass drum is particularly loud and so is the bass, but when you listen to it without the bass up, the bass, like in terms of just hearing it actually played in the album, sounds very quiet. The drums have a very raw, very black metal feel to them. In fact, the drumming on it reminds me a lot of Marduk. It is a lot of straightforward blast beats throughout this, and it just keeps pretty much going like a machine. So it's very raw, and it has a feeling of maybe purposely being underproduced just to kind of capture that raw sound, but there are some aspects I probably would have changed just to give it a slightly better sound, but all in all, I think it captures what they were going for. Now, this song pretty much sticks with a good black metal / black and death metal sound throughout up until about the 4-minute point where you get a really kind of doomy sort of riff that comes in that I thought was particularly tasty. It kind of reminded me of a blackened version of Incantation, which, if you watch any of these reviews, I bring up Incantation a lot because I love those guys. Now, the next track, Drowned to Infernal Depths, actually, once again, favors more of the black metal, and for the first half of this album, I would say it favors more black metal than death metal in this. This does have some dissection-esque sort of melodies that are in here, but it is very blast beat forward, and it gets kind of thrashy in some sections. Now, there's a strange breakdown that comes in about the 2-minute and 20-second mark that I thought was not particularly catchy, but it sort of moves into this nice groovy tremolo strum part that had a really catchy melody to it, and then it kind of ebbs back and forth between that breakdown and that melody, to which I thought was the breakdown really necessary because it really didn't add anything to the song. In fact, the melody part I thought would have been even better. Now, one of my favorites on here was No Promise of God. This one starts off pretty much very differently than any other song on here. It opens up very atmospheric. It's just kind of a tribal rhythm with a cool bass line, and then you hear the guitar slowly come in, these interesting melodies that almost sound more like cellos than guitars. I thought it was a really cool moment, and then it moves into more of their standard fare territory, but I like the fact that they incorporated that melody into this whole section of blast beats and riffing, and it's still very prevalent in that part. So I thought it was very cool they incorporated that, maybe added a little bit of dissonance to it, and it really kind of kept the song going. Plus they brought back that opening section a little bit later and added some creepy whispers over it, which I thought were good for effect. The song also brings in some really catchy melodies on here, like very much bordering on melodic death metal, that I thought were particularly good. Now, there are a couple of tracks there I think they go overly dissonant. Rather than trying to create any sort of melody or memorable hooks, they just go for the most squealing noise possible. Some of it really reminded me of Consummation or Diocletian, which generally go for the most noisy, dissonant, ugly riffs possible. And generally they really achieve that, but they kind of sacrifice hooks in there, and I kind of need hooks. That's just me personally. I need something to draw me in. Give me a memorable melody or a riff. And some of these were just walls of noise. Magma Prophet was one of those. I thought it had some standout moments, but for the most part, it was just a lot of chaotic riffing, and it ends in pretty much a blender of dissonance. So it kind of lost me on that one. And the Plague of Justinian also did pretty much the same thing. Didn't offer a lot of memorable hooks on it, and just moved from part to part, adding more scathing riffs on top of that, while Heavier in Hell weren't very memorable. Plus, the guitar tone on this is very gritty and definitely more centered towards black metal, so it almost has sort of a static-like quality to it. It's very, very rough, and you can kind of lose the melodies in there sometimes. Now, where the album took an interesting turn was around the track Life Eater. This is the most direct and straight-to-the-point song on there. It is singular in purpose, that it just wants to be a flat-out, high-speed, raging song, and it achieves that. Has some really distinct, cool riffings, probably some of the most memorable riffs on here. Even has sort of an early Behemoth sound to it as well. I really dug this song. Like, this one was just flat-out nasty. The vocals actually came out a little bit more in this one, and you could really actually hear him a little bit. He kind of sounds like Dallas Tuller Wade, formerly of Nile, which, you know, now comparisons seem to be happening a lot in this video. And he also occasionally sounds like Bernie Greenway, which was pretty interesting. The song doesn't meander about. It is straight to the point, just being Heavier in Hell. I really, really dug this one. It's one of my favorites on this album. Then the following two tracks surprisingly take a turn to almost straightforward death metal. The blackened elements almost disappear entirely. In there, Rotted Flesh offers more intricate riffing, some shreddier solos, and almost some tech death flair to it. And there's even a bridge on here that has some distinct parts that remind me a lot of Cannibal Corpse, of all things. The last track, The Soul Beneath Us, opens up with a triplet chug that pretty much screams death metal right away. It kind of reminded me of Decapitated. Like, again, all these blackened elements seem to just be thrown out in the favor of just fast, thrashy death metal towards the end. And it's kind of a pacing issue. You know, very different from front to back, where some of these should have been scattered about to really kind of make it more of a homogenized thing versus almost sounding like these were two EPs thrown together. This last song is awesome, though. It has some parts that remind me a lot of Suffocation in terms of the chuggy, palm-muted breakdowns, and even towards the end has these odd pinch harmonics that definitely scream immolation throughout. Really dug this, but again, it's sort of a mixed bag of an album. You're getting one thing early on and another thing later on, and it just feels like two different bands, or a band still trying to figure out its identity. So overall, I'm going to give it 3 stars. I think there's a lot of promise with this band. It just kind of need to figure out either how to blend this sound or go one direction or the other, because they really don't blend these styles too often, like the back half being more straightforward death metal, the front half having more dissonant, ugly black metal, I would say. It's sort of a tale of two sounds. I'm definitely curious as to where they go from here. This is, after all, their first full length, so who knows what changes along the way. But I think there's a lot of promise here, and I'd like to hear more from them. So, if you like the review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do shit like this all the time. Thanks for watching, guys.